Good evening.
Hi, Jake.
All right, Damian. Hello, everyone. How's it going, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. How are you? How was your weekend?
Good. Yeah, good. New location for me tonight because we're painting my study. So
right.
I'm under the stairs.
So is that you painting it?
Yeah, cool. Got to muck in. I can use my webcam to show you. Mate, I'm seriously under the stairs. Look. Ridiculous. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. I've had a nice weekend. Just watched the match now. So,
brilliant. Yeah. Well, look, thanks for doing this. And thanks to everyone for getting involved again. For all of those who listen to the High Performance Podcast. And again, getting time being us. Listening to the pod has changed people's lives. Incredible and brilliant. But we're all still getting low messages from people saying, I'm just still struggling with mindset. And I think so much of that is everything that we're all going through at the moment. Please realise that everyone, right? I was just chatting, I don't know about you, Damian, but I was just chatting to Harriet, and it just feels almost the hardest it's been because there's no end in sight now. It's been kind of a relentless slog. It's Groundhog Day. We're all homeschooling. Normally Sunday night you think, yes, you know, a bit of a break. It's not like that now. So I think it's so important, first of all, that we all realise everyone's in the same boat, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's that nice quote in there that we might all be, we're all in the same storm. We're all in different boats, you know, with different circumstances. But I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're all facing this long haul at the minute where those of us that are homeschooling, we've got another 5 or 6 weeks at least of it, or working from home, trying to juggle demand. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're all facing an incredibly tough time at the moment.
So look, we feel you at home. We understand what everyone's going through, but we just want to really talk about mindset this evening because I believe, and I think Damian is the same, is that the root of all of the good stuff that you can get in your life comes from mindset. And the brilliant thing about that is that if you learn the tricks, if you put in the work, you can control your mindset. You can make the decision to have that positive mindset. But it is not an easy thing, Damian. Look, actually, we're going to talk about the books a bit later on, but the reason why I picked this book this evening, The Virgin Way, is that, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, is that when I was living in Norwich and growing up and then moved to London and was trying to sort of make it as a TV presenter, I assumed that there was amazing things that other people knew until I read the first book. This is not the first one, but the first book by Richard Branson, where he just goes through all the decisions he made in his life, how he set up Virgin, just doing things differently to everybody else, and most importantly of all, believing that he could. And I wanted to pick that book up because it totally changed my mindset. That then I thought, all right, I can just go and do this because Richard Branson had nothing special. He just went and did it. And it was entirely a victory of mindset, I think, Virgin.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like, you look at some of the small decisions in terms of, you know, like when he set up the airline, didn't he? I've heard him tell the story where he said he was trying to book a flight to New York and he couldn't get through and he spent hours on the line, and that led him to one or two conclusions. Either British Airways were running the airline really badly and inefficiently, or there was such demand that they couldn't cope with it. And he took that one bit of information and decided that on the back of that, he was going to have the courage to start an airline. You know, exactly like you say, but he took action.
Okay, well, let's talk about it then. There's so many questions coming in already. Jamie has said, do you think permanent mindset change is possible or more of an ongoing process of conditioning to think and do different? What do you reckon?
Yes. So I think, like, we know that the brain is plastic, so the brain can change and adapt. There's a famous study that was done with London taxi drivers when they were studying for the knowledge, and they knew that once they'd invested that much time in studying and their spatial awareness of roads and things like that. It changed the shape of the brain. So it can happen, but I think Jamie's point is that I think it's not an either or. I think you can change it permanently, but it is an ongoing process of conditioning to do that.
I think what I would say is that, Jamie and everyone else, is that I don't know if it's a difficult one, this mindset thing, because I know I still have the same brain, right, that I had when I was growing up in Stoke Holy Cross in Norfolk, right? What has changed are my behaviours and the way that I talk to myself, and also the way that I try and get my whole family to talk. So, for example, with my kids, I can't is absolutely a banned phrase in this house. You can say you're finding things difficult, or I don't know how to do this or something, but I can't is like, that's the one thing we just don't say. Yeah. Because I think that it's indicative of having that sort of mindset of negativity. And we spoke last week, didn't we? Instead of saying things like, why can I never find a partner? It needs to be, right, what can I do to make sure I really find a partner? Or I know I'm really special, so what can I do to make people realize how amazing I am? Or why do I not get good grades at school? Right, what can I do to get better grades? If you say, why don't I do this? Why do I always fail at this? It's that constant sort of little negative thought coming in. And something that changed things for me, Damian, was an exercise that I picked up on about a year ago, where every time a negative thought comes into your head, and I do annoy my wife by this, by the way, every time a negative thought comes into your head, I immediately try and think of like 5 reasons for positivity, almost not as a punishment for having a negative thought, but almost to condition myself that the negative thought is a waste of time and the positive stuff is the good stuff. And actually, it's hard. It is hard at first, but the more you do it, the more you realize I could do 55 good things, but you don't see those. You see the negative stuff. You sort of think, oh, I'll never think of 5 positive things, but you do. You find them. They're there if you look for them, and the more you look for them, the more you see them.
Exactly. So that's the difference that was defined before about optimism and pessimism. You know, both approaches are right. So if you believe that everyone's against you and that things are never going to work out, you'll find all that evidence that you want. If you believe, like you are trying to do, that there is brilliant opportunities out there, you'll start to spot them as well. But I think that's a really important point to make on any of this stuff. There's no right or wrong of any of it. It's just which mindset helps you. Does pessimism help you more than optimism? Inevitably, most people say probably not, in which case start, rather than beat yourself up for it, start looking at ways in which you can start to alter it.
Okay, look, there's lots of people with very sort of similar questions here. We've got a question that came on Instagram, Damian, saying, any advice on actually implementing the changes? I feel like I can never get started. And then we had a question here from David saying, how do you sustain a change mindset and not fall back into previous mindsets? Loads of people with a sort of similar kind of question about how do we actually make the change. So there's people watching this evening and they want genuine, practical, these are the steps that you can take. What should we do?
There's 3 things. There's 3 common reasons why people either don't change or don't sustain change. So if you think of it like a triangle, think about the tip of the triangle is the question, why do you want to change? What's in it for you? So that will inevitably be emotion filled. It might be that if it was about going on a diet, rather than talk about how much weight you want to lose, the why is, why do you want to lose weight? And it might be, I want to be on holiday with the kids and feel that I can run around, or I want to put a pair of jeans on that make me feel fantastic. Whatever it is, you need to have a really clear why do you want to have this happen. That provides you with a swell of emotion. The second reason people struggle with it is because they don't know what they want to change. So it's almost they don't know how to measure it or exactly what it is they should be working on. Now, this is very much a logical driven thing that says, how do I measure my progress towards it? And then the third reason is they don't know how to change it. And this is very much where you would get into the small steps, the sort of the process goals that say, so what can I do that moves me one step closer today? So when we often talk about the 1%ers, this is where we just say, what can I do? What's one small thing I can do differently that takes me towards it? Now, all 3 of those on that triangle have to be aligned. But what you'll often find is that when people struggle, it's often because they've missed one of the parts of that triangle out.
Right. Just run through the 3 for us. Outcomes.
So outcomes, performance, and process. Okay. So if you think about somebody like when we were lucky enough to sit down with Dina Asher-Smith, this is a very common technique that you'll hear lots of individual athletes talk about. So her outcome, ideally, is to be a fantastic representative to young women here in the UK, that they can break through glass ceilings, and she can inspire the next generation of girls to want to go and break their own glass ceiling. The performance goal is, in terms of what time she's going to run in the 200 meters final in Tokyo this summer. So we could show up at the finish line of the track on Tokyo, and we can measure to see what she'll do. And she'll have done lots of analysis of what her rivals are. The process stuff will be what she's focused on every day. So it might be she'll do 5 track sessions, she'll do 3 sessions in the gym, she'll be lifting certain amounts of weight, her nutrition, what she's eating, the diet, the rest she's getting. They're all the small steps that if she does them, they will put her in position to deliver the performance. If she delivers a performance, by definition, the outcome of inspiring that generation will follow.
Brilliant. Right. Well, let's get into some clips then. Before we do, there's a question from Lee. He wants to know, do we believe that mindset has to constantly evolve if you want to grow? That's from Lee Jones. Look, it's a brilliant question, Lee. And I think that both of us would nod and say, yes, mindset has to constantly evolve if you want to grow, because you have to constantly evolve if you want to grow. And one of the most important parts of mindset is to have this growth mindset, this open ability to listen to other people, to try and understand what they're trying to say, to accept their point of view, even if it's different to yours, and just to live a sort of a more open and embracing way of attacking the world, rather than this sort of narrow-minded focus. And it's spoken about so often on the podcast. Mindset is, I don't know, Damian, what, 80% of the conversations we have? And when we always say when we leave a footballer, we've never spoken about football. When we leave a Wilkinson, we didn't talk about rugby. I
often think back to when we sat down with Kelly Holmes and we asked her that question about how much of her success in 2004 winning an Olympic gold was down to her ability to run fast, and how much of it was her ability to run fast under pressure. And she attributed the mental side of her success her success. She attributed 80% of it down to the mental side, the mindset that she'd learned over that period of time. So I've yet to meet an elite performer that's attributed less than 70% to it as a basic rule of thumb.
That's brilliant then. For everyone listening to this, 70% as a minimum is about your mindset. So before you can attack everything else, we've got to get the mindset right. So have a little listen to 3 of the guests who joined us on the High Performance Podcast. You're going to hear from Dame Kelly Holm, double gold medal winner. You're going to hear from Stephen Bartlett, who was stealing frozen pizzas to feed himself, and a few years later had built a company worth over £200 million. And then you're going to hear from the former Manchester United player, Robin Van Persie, and he's going to be talking about the decisions he had to make. And he's a brilliant one for this, because what you'll hear him talk about is an exact example of having to take action because your mindset has changed. As a person, you have changed and you have grown. Have a listen.
You know, I always believe that one person can change somebody's life. Mum was my PE teacher, you know. We're still friends to this day to my PE teacher, because it was her that actually said to me, Kelly, you can be good. And this is the part of why I started my charity, but that moment was just having an identity is so important, you know, for anybody, knowing where they're going to go, what they're going to do, what they want to do, finding passion. I feel lucky that I had the upbringing I had, lucky that I had those feelings inside me at a very young age, you know, because 2 dreams were to be in the army as a physical training instructor and to be Olympic champion, and I've done both.
How am I clever? Hard question. Not good at math, not good at English, not really good at anything as it relates to school. My grades were so bad that I forged the grade certificate. So that's probably my dad's just found that out. But the certificate I gave him was forged because my brothers were all straight A's, so I felt bad. I think I have always believed that I could. And that, as a force for learning new things and making yourself seem smart, is remarkable. That as a force for achieving things and putting yourselves in situations that you're not qualified to be in is unbelievable. So if there was one thing I'd say, it's that I always believed I could, even when there was no reason for me to believe such a thing.
What does this person offer me? And it had nothing to do with money. It was just do they bring something positive in my life? Anything, even if it's something small, it's fine.
Yeah.
But they weren't at one certain point. And then I just invited them, and I said to two of my childhood friends, I said, guys, I love you, I respect you, but I have different dreams than you guys. So it was stop here.
Wow.
It was
And
stop.
how old were you when you were having this conversation?
24, 25.
Wow.
Yeah, and these guys I knew from a young age. I said, because you make different choices, you have different priorities than me, and I can't have that. I can't have negativity in my life, because this is where I want to go to. And if I have to constantly lose energy on you guys, it's not gonna help me. That's ruthless, that's hard. But I felt that I needed to do that.
I love those clips. It's so nice, isn't it, to just remind ourselves of the people that have joined us over the last few series.
Yeah, definitely. And there's some like, it makes you realise as well just how many golden nuggets that these people have given us. Like Robin's example there. It's a very personal example, but is incredibly generous to share it. That sometimes people are with us, as we said at the time, for seasons, reasons, and lifetimes. Jay.
Nice. Do you know, actually just explain seasons, reasons, and lifetimes quickly in case people are thinking, what was that?
Yeah, of course. So we're saying that sometimes that we're all tribes, we all have tribes, we all have people around us. But when we've got a dream or an ambition or a goal that we want to go for, some people will be with us for the season. It might be a certain period of time in our lives that people come along and show up. Some people might be with us for a very specific reason. They can offer us something. And some people are with us for the whole lifetime of our journey. And it's not that anything is good or bad on this, but sometimes you just need to accept that sometimes you need to say, like Robin gave the example there, these were friends he'd grown up with, but the season was over, where he was going was taking him in a different direction, and
It's a challenge,
he was
isn't
able
it?
to end it. Yeah, definitely.
Courtney's got in touch to say, what advice would you give on pursuing a growth mindset when those around you, due to lockdown, have a limited mindset? I mean, I guess, first of all, there's a question about taking on the challenge of helping those around you to have a growth mindset, get them to listen to the High Performance podcast might be a good way to start. I think the other thing we have to realize, Damian, is that we can control ourselves, but you can't control everyone around you. Also, you can't cut out everyone around you because they're family, or it just isn't feasible to do it. So we also have to find a way of still being ourselves, still pursuing the life and the dreams and the ambitions that we want, and accepting that there will be people in our lives that don't necessarily see those, and find a way to be comfy with that.
Yeah, there's some really fascinating research on this that I like sharing on this one, Jake. It was by a guy called David Cantor, who's a psychiatrist in New York. In fact, I'll tell you where a lot of his work is often credited. Do you remember Sex and the City, the TV series? Well, they based the four main women characters in that show on David Cantor's research. And what he did was he looked at when you put people in a room or in a group or even in family units, you'll get one of four different types of responses. People tend to go to one of the four naturally. So some people are initiators, what he calls them. These are people that are full of energy and ideas and passion. On the other extreme, you've got some people that he describes as blockers. These are the people that will tell you why it won't work, why it's a waste of time, why we're all going to hell in a handbasket. You've got some people that are just detached, that don't care and are not engaged in it. And then you've got some people that he describes as adapters, that they can go with the flow. So they can be supportive, but only if you ask them to be. And I think that the important thing is people can be different roles depending on different scenarios. So if you were planning a summer holiday, you might be the initiator with all the ideas. But if you were planning Sunday lunch, you might be the blocker. So it doesn't mean that people are fixed in one particular type. And I think it's sometimes helpful to think about the group that you're surrounded, whether it's a family, in each of those four dynamics, and think where people are. And then that way it gives you the chance to move them and say to them, I need your support here, I need you to be helpful, rather than be passive or overly negative about it.
And there's a lot of people on here actually asking about having people around you that aren't part of this growth mindset approach when you want to be. Can I just point out, which I think is really important, is that a person with a growth mindset doesn't go, no, this is what I think, I'm not listening to you, I'm not part of your world, I'm not interested in what you're saying. The whole point of a growth mindset is that the people with a growth mindset are happy to accept other people in that world. They're happy to talk to them. Oh, my dog's appearing now. Belle, what are you doing? Come here. I think Belle was asleep on Florence's bed upstairs, and I assume Florence is now asleep, so Belle's got a ball and come down. The whole point of having a growth mindset is that we need to accept everyone. One of my real frustrations with the society we live in at the moment is that we seem unable to accept other people's opinions, other people's arguments, or other people's approaches. We just bury our head in the sand and say, no, that's not for me. I'm not interested. I'm on a different road. The whole point of a growth mindset is that it is okay to listen to what other people have to say, to kind of question what they're thinking and why. But then just maybe they'll change the way you think a bit. Maybe they won't, but still try and come back to what you really believe. And I know that, like, I think Damian and I are lucky that we're in our 40s, because I think that when I was in my 20s, I had no idea who I was. I was like working on children's BBC, unsure really what the future held, unsure how to act, how to be. Now, I love people with a different mindset in my life or a different challenge. Something that brought to my life completely, Damian, was this different way of looking at things and not being put in a box. I think that's an important part of the growth mindset. We have to accept the people around us. This is about opening up, not about cutting out, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if you have the growth mindset, you have that belief that everybody has something to teach you. Everybody's got a bit of knowledge, a bit of wisdom, that if you ask them the right questions and listen to them, they'll impart something really valuable. And I know that's the premise of what we're trying to do with the High Performance Podcast, which is we're fortunate enough to speak to these people that have been on incredible journeys that are then happy to say, this is what I've learned. This is what I want you to know about this.
Really good. KP on camera says, I've got a quick question about football. I've got all the quality to be at the top level, but when I get on the pitch, my mind gets lost in negativity. How do I change this? I mean, one of the big things you can do, KP, is start by asking yourself whether it is beneficial. This negative mindset, does it do anything good for you at all? The answer obviously is no, it doesn't. It just holds you back and it just restricts you. It's important that you remember that you are in control, right? That is your mind playing a trick. It's making you think that everything's going to go wrong or bad things are going to happen. It isn't true. It's a difficult one, Damian, isn't it? Because we talk a lot on the podcast about trust the evidence in front of you, but sometimes the negative mindset changes the evidence because it affects your performance. You perform badly, and then you go, there you go, knew it. I knew I was rubbish. I knew I was going to fail today, and now I have. But you've only failed because of the mindset.
Yeah, and I think that's why KP's point is a really good one. If you're spotting this pattern of behaviour that's happening every time you're on the field, your brain starts to focus on the negativity. Start preparing before you go on the field. Then start spotting these automatic negative thoughts and giving yourself a trigger or a different way of doing it. So a good example of this is the All Blacks have moments that they've trained themselves for this, and they have something that they trigger. So one of them, Richie McCaw, used to stand with his hands on his head, and he used to look for the crossbar. So he used to look at the crossbar at both ends of the field because that gave him a sense of perspective rather than focus on the detail. Do that. Some of the others sort of shuffle their studs in the ground to root them back in reality of the situation. So if you know that this is happening to you, have a little trigger that when it happens, how do you just break the pattern and get yourself back on track again?
That's really good. I like that. John O'Brien says, dreams, visions, knowing where you want to go and why. There seems to be a big influence to changing mindset. Any advice on how to identify where you want to go? I want to just touch on this briefly, Damian, because I think part of the problem is we're all putting too much pressure on ourselves to go, right, where do I want to be? Bang, set this amazing goal, and that's fantastic. But then you're then applying pressure to yourself to get there, which can be a good and a bad thing. I wonder whether sometimes we're best just to say, right, what would really make me happy? Let me give you an example, right? The High Performance Podcast. The only thing that I wanted to do was to really enjoy the conversations with the people that we were having. Find someone that I could work alongside who really understood this area of high performance and who I got on really well with. That's you, by the way, Damian.
Thank you. That's kind.
To impact people's lives. And I was really strict with myself because I have another job. I've got a few other bits going on. I've got a young family. I'm kind of busy already. And I remember saying to myself, right, Jake, this could be really fun and really exciting. But if you're going to dive into this, because as you know, Damian, one of my other sort of key phrases, which is the way that it's said, it was stolen from Steven Gerrard, all in. I remember saying, right, if you're going to be all in for this podcast, if you don't enjoy it, if you don't get anything out of it, if it isn't enjoyable, and if you're having no impact on people, then you have to be prepared to knock it on the head. And I think that was a really important thing. All I wanted to do was just put a smile on my face. And I think sometimes that's all we need to do with these big goals we have, is find the thing that makes us happy, because the thing that makes us happy we'll enjoy. Therefore, we'll be better at it because we enjoy it. Therefore, we'll get rewards, and the whole thing will.
I think that's such a powerful example that you're offering, Jake, because nowhere are you talking about, and again, it's a theme that we've seen with a lot of our interviewees. No one talks about making a certain amount of money and that then suddenly makes them happy, or achieving a level of fame or success that makes them happy. We've met people that have got to that stage and gone, I still didn't make me happy. The obvious example is Johnny Wilkinson. We go back to that a lot of what people from the outside saw him as being incredibly successful, and yet this was a guy in tears before he left his hotel room trying to find ways to escape the pressure. And he's then sharing it that, sometimes it is, there's an old saying that there's no point climbing the ladder of success to find it was leaning against the wrong wall. It's almost like you've got to know and your premise of start with what makes you happy, what gives you energy, what do you enjoy, and then start working out how you can get more of that in your life.
Yeah, and Pierre is completely right. Pierre Frizzell, who I saw was on here last week. Nice to see you back with us. There is no yet. That was the Matthew McConaughey phrase, wasn't it? There is no yet. We don't get anywhere. And he says, I want to have an abundance mindset. And I agree, there's enough for everyone. But I find it hard to be truly happy for someone. And I start to compare my life to theirs. Right. All you have to remember, Andy, and this is a phrase we've used on the pod a few times, comparison is the thief of joy. Don't do it. There's nothing good to be found in that. You just enjoy doing you and you. There's no validation to be found in comparing your life to someone else's. Oh, by the way, the other really important thing, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, Damian, it's actually impossible to compare your life to someone else's. When you say you're comparing your life to someone else's, you're comparing your real life, where you know about all the crap stuff that goes on, with their edited version of their life. Only the things they're telling you, only the things that they're putting on social media, only the stuff that they're shouting about. And by the way, they're comparing their lives to yours, because all they're seeing is all of your edited stuff. There are things that have happened to me today that I don't want to be putting on my Instagram feed for a reason. But people look at it and go, oh, he's had a great day. There's been some crap stuff as well. So it's so important. And that's a really important point before we go any further, Damian, because it stops people. It stops people getting where they want to and should be, because they compare to others and they sort of give up. Dangerous.
It's poisonous, yeah. I mean, that's why, without revealing who we're chatting with tomorrow, I'm fascinated around this thing, because this was a person that has comparisons forced on them, even though they haven't invited it. And I think I'm going to be fascinated to explore how do you break out of that cycle of not measuring your insides against somebody else's outsides.
Get your guesses in, guys. Should we give them a couple of clues?
Yeah, go on. You go first.
All right, we can each pick one clue. I'm going to give a very clear clue, but it's not going to give it away, I don't think. It is a Premier League captain. What would your clue be, Damian?
Oh, all right, okay. This is a guy that he ghosts. He ghosts around. That's rubbish. That's rubbish, but it'll be obvious if it's
I might have given it away, I think. Courtney, thanks for that. My favourite quote Courtney's just said, don't let the internet rush you. Nobody is posting their failures. It's good, isn't it?
Brilliant. I like that.
A while back, right? Do you know one of the things I really like, Damian, is that we're all flawed, okay? So I sit on here with you and say, don't compare yourself to other people. And then I'll go onto Instagram and see someone with like some brilliant job they've landed or something amazing. And I'll be like, oh man, why that didn't come my way and it went their way, man. But we all do it all the time, even when we say like, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And it's really interesting for me to see that quote from Courtney, don't let the internet rush you. Nobody's posting their failures, because when that happens, it isn't Jordan Henderson. It isn't Jack Grealish. Look at all the guesses coming in. It isn't Declan Rice. Oh, someone got it. Ryan says Harry Kane. No. What I do, Daniel, I imagine life as a graph, right? Well, I'm sitting in the same studio as Steven Gerrard, Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard are really good examples. 2006, they're playing for England at the World Cup, and I'm working on Children's BBC. So they're here on the graph, right? And I'm here. And I'm not talking about my own graph. I was exactly where I wanted to be, but in the sort of like comparison thing. They're playing for England, I'm working on Children's BBC. And then you fast forward 14 years or 12 years to 2018, and suddenly we're sitting in the same studio, and I'm right alongside them. And then they go off and manage Rangers and Chelsea, and I'm staying on the TV, and maybe it's a bit more like that. And then maybe that. And just remember that, man. Life changes and it moves, and eventually, Harry Maguire, no, Kyle. Eventually, you will get to where you want to be, but you won't get there any quicker by comparing yourself to other people. Shall we listen to a few
I'll tell you one other thing on that, though, Jay. Sorry, I was going to say that, like, when we've met, like, Frank or Steven Gerrard or Robin Van Persie, what I always think is interesting is how much respect and affection they have for you, because when they've then gone into your world, whether it's in the studio or things like that, and when I've spoken to them, the amount of support and help and how generous you've been with them in navigating their way through that world is something that they have, that growth mindset of knowing what they don't know about broadcasting and things like that. And the fact that that they look up to you. Do you see what I mean? So it's almost like difficult that, like you say, you look on that graph, and yet when they've come into your world, they've got obvious admiration for you and respect the way that you've helped them.
And I love, one of the things I loved was seeing them close up, seeing the way they operate, because I think that doing TV is a completely different world, obviously, to playing or managing in football. But the way they operate in that world gives you a really interesting insight into how they were. So like Steven Gerrard, always there, super early, looking really smart. You know, he might have a coffee, but he didn't want any of the chips and the pies and whatever it was that we were eating. He was looking after himself. And I remember Frank Lampard, always, he would be a brilliant pundit. And then the ad break would come, and I'd look at him and he'd be like, and I'd always be like, "Are you all right?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm just thinking." And he was either thinking, was I a bit harsh on that person, or should I have gone a bit harder on that? But, you know, he was assessing all the time what he'd done, whether he'd done it right. And I thought that was brilliant, like that constant sort of evaluation of his own performance. It doesn't matter whether he's playing for Chelsea, managing Derby, managing Chelsea, or sitting on a TV screen. He's just constantly checking his levels, it was a good insight.
Yeah, exactly. It's consistent regardless of wherever they are.
Exactly. Right. So we've spoken about mindset for the last half an hour or so. Let's show you some clips then of the people that joined us on my Performance podcast and the specific things that they've done to continue having the kind of mindset that you need if you're going to be successful. There's some clips coming up. We're going to start with the England Rugby League manager, one of the most mind-blowing, moving, and incredible podcast that we ever recorded was with Sean Wayne. If you're watching us live right now and you've not heard the episode, the High Performance Podcast with Sean Wayne, here's a small clip of him, and please go and listen to the full episode. It was one of the greatest things we've ever done. Here they are.
It was never ever walking around patting yourself on the back. You finished, you're at your best. It was always, make up better. And I had that tattoo put on me when I had a few drinks. And that's just Kaizen, means make up better, never being happy. So nobody can tell me it's quite sad that you're never going to be happy. I think it's fantastic. I did some work for a bank, and I was talking to a guy who was 45, never gets his bonus. He's just waiting to retire. It was his words for me. I'm just waiting till I retire now, Sean. And I said to him, Are you going to waste 20 years of your life after you retire to get your pension? Every day, you can't wait for Fridays and you hate Sundays. And I feel like saying, mate, just get some.
No matter what your circumstances are at the time, that doesn't determine where you're going. You know, just because your friends are poor doesn't mean you're gonna be poor. If you have dreams that you have to believe them in everything. You have to believe them. Your grandmother, your aunt, your uncle, your father, your mother, your friends, they don't have to believe, as long as you believe in it. And you gotta work, you gotta work each and every single day. Like for me, Because the opportunity will come. That's what I realized. The opportunity will come, or it might not come. For some people, it doesn't come. But I prepared each and every single day by going to training. And when the opportunity came, I was ready. When I got my bursary, and when I got my scholarship to another school in the township, then I got my trials to go to. I'll be training every day, not knowing that the opportunity will come, but I was prepared when it came. Most people complain and complain and complain. Opportunity presents itself and they're not ready.
It was 11 weeks after my accident. In hindsight, I don't know whether I was fully prepared for it, but I managed to go out there and do the job, enjoyed it, or started to enjoy it. I was nervous at first. But yeah, it was definitely, my mindset at the time was definitely of that, how I was before, in terms of I have no weakness, I'll go back out, I'll get behind the wheel, everything will be as it was before. It all sounds weird now, reliving it with how I see my mindset changed now after having 2-3 years living like this. It all seems a little bit, I don't know if I'd necessarily do it the same, but that's how it happened.
Love those. I mean, Seo Kolisi, Damian, was such a brilliant list. And if you don't know, he's the first ever black Springboks captain, lifted the World Cup for South Africa in rugby. And what I loved about him, when he talks about, people complaining, when opportunity presents itself, they're not ready. And there was a great question that came in a second ago. Where was it? It was from someone saying, how do you not always just be the person that says, I'm going to do it on Monday, or I'm going to start next week? This is a really important one, I think, when it comes to mindset, Damien, is that we never know when the opportunity is going to present itself, do we? So if you say, I'm going to really change my mindset from tomorrow, or I'm really going to start from next week, or I'm just going to not worry about it today. Today could be the day that the opportunity arrives and you're not ready. Yeah,
exactly. Again, I'll go back to that brilliant interview that interview we did with the brilliant Dina Asher-Smith, saying it was a brilliant interview makes it sound as if we're being self-aggrandizing. But when we asked that question about, well, how do you cope that you might be racing other women in Tokyo that have been doping or been engaging in illegal substances? And that was where it was like, well, I'm not worrying about that. I'm just focused on what I'm doing. And if I can walk off that track knowing that everything I've done is what I would define as my best, that is my gold medal, whether I win a medal or not. And I think exactly like what she said, what Sia said, and what pretty much everyone else has said, it's that consistency of just habits, doing the right thing every day, regardless if nobody's watching. And eventually when the opportunity comes, it puts you in the right position.
Yeah. So let's run through then sort of what we've both, Damian and myself, have taken away from 3 series of the High Performance Podcast when it comes to mindset. My sort of main things that I've learned from the people that we've spoken to. The very first thing, and probably the most important thing, is to take total responsibility for having this mindset change. Because every time you're blaming outside forces, Nims Purja came on the pod, and by the way, we should say congratulations to Nims for being the first person ever to get to the top of K2 in the winter. Never been done before. And again, they're blown away in a horrendous gale a couple of days before, but he refused to accept that was going to stop him. But his mindset was stronger than the force of the wind on K2, and he made it to the top. And he is a remarkable guy. And he sat on our podcast and he said, please understand that I come from a place where people don't do what I've done, but because of mindset, I went and did it. So don't blame anything else. Don't blame governments. Don't blame family. Don't blame outside forces. Don't blame finance. Don't blame where you're from. Still find your way through your own personal journey. It can be an amazing one. That's the first thing. The second thing, when people worry about what is this grand thing, just something that makes you happy, something that you have a passion for, something that people tell you you're great at, something that puts a smile on your face, something that every single day, and I've said this to Damian before, I feel so lucky that every day I wake up, I feel renewed with energy. I'm doing this early 5:30 get up. But the only reason I've got that cup full of energy every day is because I have a real passion for what I'm doing and what we're talking about. And that is very important. And the final one is the self-talk. Who do you talk to more in your life than anybody else? It's only you. So if you tell yourself you can't do something, if you decide you've already failed before you've started, then you absolutely will have done. Every time that little negative thought comes in your head, replace it with 5 positive ones. And trust me, when you start listening to how often a little negative thought comes in, it's a lot at the beginning. And work it out, and embrace a life of positivity, because you're only going to get this one.
Definitely. I think that's really inspiring. I think what I've learned, there's two things. One, be careful who you go to for validation or for criticism. So choose the people around you who got your best interests at heart, who will give you criticism when they feel a little bit deserved, but equally will tell you when they think you've done well. Don't look for validation outside of that circle. Is a big, powerful one for me. And then secondly, focus on, if you want small steps, focus on those non-negotiable behaviours, and any decision that you make, use them almost as mental gatekeepers. Does this achieve the 3 non-negotiables that I want? If the answer is yes, take the next step. If the answer is no, we'll question whether it's the right decision for you.
Yeah, that's really nice, Damian. And Jeffrey Evans has thrown a lovely comment into the group. He says, since listening to the podcast, I slowed down. I focused much more on the moment and making sure I'm doing the best I can. And actually, that's a really good point, because someone said earlier, don't be rushed by the internet. Don't be rushed by people around you. And I haven't really considered that. I think that's a really good thought, isn't it?
Love it.
You know, you're rushed by other people. You just do you. But the fact that I make sure I'm just doing the best I can, that's probably a good way for us to kind of end, I think, Damian, because that is literally the best you can do. We don't put undue pressure on ourselves or other people. Just make sure you're doing the best you can. Make the next right decision.
Yes, that's it. And then that takes us where at the top of this conversation we spoke about having a really clear why, having a clear what, and a clear how. It's the process. Just make the next right decision, then the next one. That's process, and that's what creates momentum, and that's what creates energy.
Love it. Damian, I know obviously you're advertising your own book on the wall behind you.
Those things.
Which you can get from Amazon. But I did say, would you mind bringing a book on? I obviously mentioned earlier on that I found Richard Branson's first autobiography hugely inspiring, because he just went and did it. And I think that's very powerful. What do you want to say?
This is mine. This is the 13th round, Hurricane Carter, Rubin Hurricane Carter. It's a brilliant story. This was a guy who was he was a phenomenal middleweight boxer, and he found himself being fitted up and framed for a murder that he didn't commit, and was put in prison for a long time. He was eventually found innocent. And I think there was a film about him years later, but the book's brilliant because he talks about how he maintained his motivation, how he kept hope alive, even in the most despondent and dark times. So again, we're all facing difficult times, but again, this gives us a sense of perspective, but just some really powerful lessons on how to get through those tough times. So I've been flicking through that recently.
Love it. And Murray's just chucked something in. Surround yourself with inspirational people. That's another really good point. So look, Ian, who said the podcast has inspired them, KP on camera, Remco, Thomas, Jeffrey, Pierre, so many people chucking messages into the group. Damian, thank you so much. So we're recording tomorrow. We're actually recording tomorrow the first episode of the 4th series of the High Performance Podcast. Put a note in your diary. In fact, why don't you choose? It would be brilliant if you could do this for us. Just send a text message to someone that you think should listen to the High Performance Podcast. The link. Tell them that the very first episode of Series 4 is on the 1st of February. But please do share the pod. There is no negative, there's no downside to sharing a podcast about positive thinking and controlling your mindset. Hey?
Yeah, that'd be brilliant.
Top man. Look, thanks a lot, Damian. Really appreciate it. So,
see you tomorrow, Jake.
Have a great weekend. I will see you a bit like this tomorrow, 4:00.
Yeah, looking forward to it. All right. And thank you for everyone for joining in as well.
Have a great week. Go make it happen. Take care. Bye.
Bye.